Video 5. Video 5. Chapter 14. I traveled to Valhalla for what I thought was going to be a normal circle meeting. Lewis and the rest of them were all in the tizzy because the Millennium was coming up way too soon for anyone's liking. We had the passing of 5 full year cycles to go before the sector will need to be retrieved from Odin's mountain. Lewis said once it is no longer in the chapel, then it has returned to Odin's mountain. I just never understood the whole thing and how it worked. I went to Valhalla and to the constellation room. I walked in with Maverick and Cyrus. I looked to who was there, and then to Cyrus and Maverick. I felt very much out of place. The kings of the kingdoms were here. Also the Saltarn circle. We knelt as we entered. "Rise, gentlemen," Lewis said. We stood. I looked to those there. "Should I be here?" I asked. "Yes, come and have a seat," Emmett stood up and said. "With the request of Emmett, yes you are," Lewis said. The meeting went on about the Millennium and the turn of the Millennium and the rotation of the Millennium and the Millennium this and the Millennium that and the kings of the Millennium, and I understood none of it. I just sat there quietly through the whole meeting, not saying a word. Afterwards, when the meeting was over, Lewis stood, or when I thought the meeting was over. "Meeting is adjourned. The gentlemen of the executive circle will remain. The others are free to part," Lewis said. All stood and left except Lewis's sons, Maverick, Cyrus, and myself, as we were part of that circle. However, it was called the Saltarn circle. "The time has come, Scott. You need to prepare to climb Odin's mountain." "Father, you can take Odin's mountain, or that Lord's mountain, and place it in your arse." "I have no desire to climb that mountain," Scott said. I started to laugh and looked to Scott, then Lewis. Emmett nudged me with his elbow, and Lewis gave me a deathly look. "Scott, you are the Millennium High Priest," he informed him. "No, Father. Kevinar was the Millennium High Priest, and he failed. Therefore, it becomes only one of your sons. Everyone just assumed it would be me, for I was born at the start of this millennium. However, to decree, it is only the first son born to the high priest. That is not me," Scott informed him. I watched as Lewis looked to his other older sons. "No, Father. I told you before I will entertain and protect our people. I am not ruling over them," Mike spoke up. "I stand with Mike," Danny said. "Paul," Lewis spoke up. "Father, please. Susan is the only woman I want to have to deal with. 6 more would drive me insane," Paul said. "I will climb that mountain, Father," Peter said, all stuffy and shit. I watched as Emmett sat there just listening. Lewis looked at Peter. "You know you cannot climb the mountain. We have discussed this time and time again." "Alex," Lewis said. "Father, no," Alex said. "I will climb it, and I will achieve it," Emmett said. "Emmett, you are too young. You are not experienced enough to climb that mountain. I do not wish to lose another son to the mountain of Odin." Lewis said sadly, "Father, I may be, as you say, young. However, sir, I am your only choice, Emmett told him. We will talk about it another time, Lewis told Emmett. Scott, I wish you would reconsider, Lewis said. Father, as young as Emmett is, I recommend you let him, as he is with Odin's gift and has a far chance of making it. Or a fair chance, Scott said. I will make it, he said, as he always said things without question of doubt. Lewis stood and moved out of the room. I looked to Emmett. What was I doing here? I asked. You are my guard of the circle. I wanted you here. When I ascend and return from the mountain, I want you, Maverick, and Cyrus at my side, going to give me what I want, Emmett said, looking to be full of confidence and shit. You know I will, I told him. It was the following week, month, not really sure when. However, Emmett and I had went down to the developmental area, to see the babies Partina had transferred. As we stood looking to them, Lewis had come to join us. Emmett and I started to kneel. Lewis placed his hand out. No need to do that. There was a hint of sorrow in his voice and on his face. I could sense he was not in a good mood and very troubled. Father, what is it? Emmett asked. This sector is missing from the sanctuary. The Stan's crystal is orange. Against my better judgment, Emmett. Climb that mountain, he said, placing his hand on Emmett's shoulder. Then I watched as Lewis drew him into his arms and held him tight. Emmett, please be careful. See with your abilities, my son. Not your ears, not your eyes. Your eyes and ears will be useless to you. Do not rely on them, Lewis told Emmett. I felt a slight, heavy burden on my chest. I knew Emmett could make it. There was just that slight feeling saying in the back of my mind, what if? It was the day of Princess Stockard Leon's graduation. The little squirt was finally graduating after 3 years in the 21st level. After the graduation, Emmett, Maverick, and Cyrus and I had gotten separated from Partina and Juanita. Seen which way my wife ran off to? Emmett asked, laughing. I believe she grabbed the Juanita, the Stockard, and went out in the education center, Cyrus said, as he was watching every movement those women made, I do believe. Emmett had a habit of losing Partina any time Juanita was around, or they escaped away from Emmett, not sure which was which. We followed Emmett out to the garden area. Juanita looked as if she could break down in tears at any moment, and Partina did not look too far behind her. Emmett walked up beside the two of them. What is going on? Someone lose their pet or close friend? Emmett said, teasing them. I took a lean on a near tree, and Cyrus and Maverick did the same. They both looked to Emmett. What is it? You two look as if you're going to break out in tears at any moment, Emmett said to them. Emmett, tell us it is not true. Please tell us, Partina said, about to break out in tears. I looked from Emmett to Juanita to Partina, and little Stockard just stood there as if she was lost. Cyrus looked to me. Then so did Maverick. I just shrugged. I had no idea. as to what was going on no more than they did. Tell you what is not true. I just got here. How about you inform me on what I have missed out on? Emmett said, and I chuckled and listened. This had to be good. Partina thinks that if you return with the sector, then you can take me as your mate. However, I told her that you will have to mate in order of kingdoms of the Millennium, and as you already have your first priestess and your high priestess, then you have to skip Atlantis and take Lizzie of Rome, Juanita explained. As I heard Juanita, I understood why they looked to be in tears, and just leaned there on that tree, listening. I never really had given that much thought, and Juanita was right. He did have to take the priestesses in order of the kingdoms. This is true. However, you are going to be my wife, and you cannot refuse me, nor can your father. I will return with the scepter, he told her, placing his arms around her and kissing her. I laughed as Juanita pushed him away and gave him a look of disbelief. Emmett Humburge, how dare you kiss my lips, as I am to be promised to the high priest, she scolded him. I laughed even more. Juanita Leon, I am going to be high priest, and you are going to be one of my priestesses, as you have been promised to me, he said with that full of shit confidence of his, which he always has. However, you have to take your priestess by order. I have been skipped, she said. No, Juanita, Partina cried. Emmett, she is wrong. Tell her she is wrong. Tell me she is wrong. Actually, she is right. However, he said, grabbing her arm and pulling her back to him, I have to have 7. So therefore, in the name of the Millennium, you will be my 3rd priestess, for you have been promised to the high priest, Emmett informed her, holding her close to him and not letting her pull away from him. Emmett, I cannot be. You have to take the daughter of the king of Brazil, she informed him. Juanita Leon, King Mitchell, has not even one daughter, and I am not taking one of his sons as my priestess, he said with laughter in his voice, and I started to laugh more, visualizing Jack and James in a priestess gown. Juanita looked to him, and a bright smile came to her face, and then she started to kiss him. Partina moved closer to the two of them, smiling, and placed her arms about the both of them. You 3 make one great threesome, so I get to be mate 4, right? Stockard said, with a smile in her voice. No, I am not marrying the sister by decree. Emmett laughed, and actually, so did we all. As Emmett pulled the two of them up the path, heading to the coaches, I watched little Stockard's face fall. Then she smiled and ran to catch up with them. I pushed off the tree I was leaning on and followed behind them. Chapter 15. The next following first of the year, it would be the time of the Millennium High Priest to start on the journey to receive the scepter. There were gatherings in celebration the last week of the previous year in the name of the Millennium High Priest, which now had a name, Executive Prince Lewis Humburge. It was the night before the first, the day Emmett was to climb the mountain. That is one night I do believe none of us will ever forget. It was the final celebration to Emmett to send him on his way. All the kings and their daughters were to be there, and all were. Everyone was having a joyful time. Maverick, Cyrus, and myself remained with Emmett, not leaving his side. We were his guards. I was now the admiral of his guards, which meant I was his second sword, opposed to him being the first. The Circle of the Millennium had only 7 members. Those 7 members were Emmett, Scott, Mike, Danny, Cyrus, Maverick, and myself. We were standing to the side of Emmett as he mingled with the crowd of people, with Partina and Juanita at his side. They were also looking for Stockard, and as they found her, they sat with her. I stood to the back of Emmett, as Cyrus and Maverick were not too far from him. One by one, the daughters of the kings made their way over to the table to sit with Emmett, all besides Princess Penelope of Xandoe. She was dancing and drinking and having a right good time at it. She came over to me, bumping into me where I stood. I gently grabbed her to settle her on her feet as to keep her from falling on me. She waved her hand and I grabbed her to settle her once again, or she was going to fall on me. "Would you like to dance, Prince Stewart?" she asked, slurring her words. I kept a hold of her and kept her distance from me, as she seemed to be trying to place her arms around my neck. "No, do you not think it would be better for you to sit with Emmett and take it easy the rest of the night, Princess?" I said to her, as I let her go. "Why, I am only enjoying myself," she said, and danced away, waving to Emmett and the others. I looked at Emmett and shook my head. I could not believe the way the woman was acting. The night went on, and Emmett and the others seemed to be having a nice time. He looked over to me. "You need to relax. The lot of you act as if someone is going to try and take my life. Loosen up, will you? Get a drink and—" He ceased talking when a crash was heard, and we all looked over to him. "You were saying?" I said as he stood and motioned Cyrus and Maverick over to where all gathered, and he and I went that way as well. Everyone at the table then followed Emmett, and not too much to my surprise, dear Princess Penelope was on the floor with her gown practically over her head, and the appetizer table turned over and practically on her head, and it seemed everyone was circling her, about her. "Let open the way. What is the meaning of this?" Emmett said, as Lewis came over, saying practically the same thing. King Douglas, her father, hurried over to her, or to his intoxicated daughter, helping her to stand. "Daddy, I fall down," she laughed, swaying and slurring her words. Then it was as if she just passed out in his arms. "Sir, I do believe the night has taken a toll, and her, the excitement and all, has tired her out. I will take her up to her room to rest for the night." He tried to come to her defense. "More like drunk," Emmett said, with a hint of disgust in his voice. "I assure you, Your Highness, she does not drink this way often. She will be much embarrassed tomorrow when she awakes." King Douglas lied for his daughter. "I am sure she will. after she gets over the sickness of the drink. Depart, Douglas. We shall have a word of this in the morn, after my son leaves, that is," Lewis told Douglas, not with the most amused tone in his voice I had ever heard from our high priest. He then clapped his hands. "Let us all return to our celebration." He waved his hand to a few of the diners. "Get this cleaned up, and quickly." I looked at Emmett, watched as he took a deep breath, placed his arms around Partina and Juanita, and we went back to the table. "You know, I will travel to Hundredus before I take her as a priestess," Emmett commented. "That could start a war and move against the Cree, Emmett," I told him. "Not if he takes a mate before it is time for him to take her. As a mate, she would be skipped, as I am, and would have to be moved to down the line. And if Emmett has all 7 by the time of the turn, then she will just luck out," Juanita said with the sweetest and utmost innocent tone in her voice. I could not help yet to chuckle. "Yes, what she said," Emmett laughed. "Then you could take me instead of her," Stockard informed Emmett. And Emmett just laughed and placed his arms around her and gave her a hug. "You are like my little sister, little squirt." "It is not happening, little bit." Emmett laughed. Emmett had us to remain at Valhalla for the night, and so we did. The next morning we all walked with him to the north side of Odin's Mountain, outside the kingdom of Atlantis. Emmett, you remember to see and hear with your abilities, not your ears and not your eyes. For some things may not be what they seem, Lewis told him as he placed his hand on Emmett's shoulders. "Father, I will be fine. I will contact you as soon as I make it down the mountain," Emmett said. "You are so sure of yourself, Lewis Humburge. Do not take anything for granted, Emmett, my son." Lewis said, very concerned, "Trust me, Father, will you? Have a little trust in me." "I do. I just worry so." Emmett patted his father's shoulder, then turned to kiss Partina and Juanita, then looked to King Austin Leon. "King Leon, you have your daughter ready for me when I return. Now you will not tell me no," he said with a mischievous smile. "You are right, Emmett. I cannot. You just return to us so I can give you my daughter," he said, also concerned. He looked to me, then Cyrus and Maverick. "You will know when I'm on my way back. Make sure you are here," he said, looking back to me. "I will?" I asked. He just gave me this get real look. "We will be here. Just make sure you're in one piece," I told him. He put his hand up, and I placed mine to his, and we made a fist. "Friends forever," he said to me. "And today," I answered to him. Letting go, he started up that mountain. "Emmett, I love you," Partina called to him with tears in her eyes. Lewis turned to me. "Lewis, Emmett always gets what he wants, sir," I said with a smile. "That he does, my son," he said, and turned with the others moving back into the kingdom. I stood at the base of the mountain for a long time, watching the direction Emmett went in. I wanted so much to be at his side, yet this was one thing he had to do alone. I knew not to follow him. However, the burden I felt was still there. I had unconsciously moved up the mountain, some keeping Emmett in my sight. Then suddenly I could not move any longer, and I was once again stuck to the mountain as I was when we were kids. Only thing I could do was watch him leave out of sight. I laughed. I was now wondering how I was going to get off this mountain. It was not long before I found I could move. I moved back down the mountain. I walked to my lodge and into my office. "You all right?" Maverick had said once I entered my office. "Yes, I am fine, just concerned is all," I informed him. "He will be fine," he assured me. "I know," I told him. Adam says Carolyn is giving Tina a hard time. She is really refusing to do as she says," Maverick said. I looked up to him and shook my head. "She really does not want to get on my bad side right now. Have her brought in here. I will deal with her," I told him. Maverick nodded his head and left out. I moved to the bar, fixing me a scotch, and moved back to my desk. As I reached the desk, Maverick and Adam entered. Adam threw Carol into the room. I turned and took a drink of my scotch and looked to Maverick, then Adam, then to Carol. "I have had about all I can of you. I am going to put up with," Adam said, and she fell to the ground. I leaned on my desk and looked to Adam. "Problems, Adam?" I asked. "Tina tells her one thing, she does another. She took the whip away from Tina. Law, if I grab a hold of her, she is going to know it," Adam said, and I looked to her as she remained in the position Adam had thrown her into. "Heal, Dinah," I told her, taking a deep breath. "Want to tell me what you were trying to prove?" I asked. "She is no better than I. She is branded and collared, the same as I. So what gives her the right to order me as she then screamed, as I moved to her and backhanded her to the floor. "I give her that authority. She knows her place. It appears you need to be taught yours." I motioned to Maverick, and he handed me the courtesan whip. "Please, my master, no, please," she started to cry. I snapped the whip. She did not move. I then swung the whip, striking her across the back. "Prepare, girl," I ordered. She then got up on her hands and knees, and I struck her until she broke position. "Take her up to her room. Tell the guards to use her for discipline," I told Adam. He nodded and moved over to her and pulled her up and drug her out. I looked to Maverick, then moved to my desk and sat. I felt lost without Emmett. With Emmett away, I really was not sure what to do with myself. I spent time with Partina and Juanita and the kids. He would be away for the passing of 40 days. I sat thinking about what Emmett said, that I would know when he had returned. That was one thing I did not understand, as to how I would know when he returned. I wondered how that would happen. The days passed, and not fast enough. Chapter 16. I was sitting in the sitting room with Maverick and Cyrus, watching a program. when I heard Emmett's voice telepathically, as clear as if he were standing beside me. "Law, meet me at the base of Odin's mountain." I sat there, looking about the room for a moment. We had never been able to communicate, if not in the same room. "Emmett?" I said aloud. Then Maverick and Cyrus looked to me as if I had went insane. I received no answer. I stood and looked at the two of them. "We need to get to the Lord's mountain," I said, and stood and started out of the lodge. The two of them hurried behind me. We rode to the base of the mountain. All was still. Not even the birds could be heard. The wind did not even seem to be blowing. I stood at the base of the mountain looking up to it. Then I saw a small figure come closer. And then it came closer and closer. The figure held what looked to be a staff. As the figure came closer, I stood looking to it. The person had very long hair, a long beard. The beard and hair was matted. The figure was filthy, and the clothing dirty and torn. As he approached, I could see it was Emmett, and in his hand he held the scepter of Odin. Cyrus and Maverick stood beside me, and as he came to be in front of us, I felt the burden lift off my chest. I felt the wind blow warm, and heard the birds once again begin to sing. Without a second thought, I went down to one knee, my head bowed. "Welcome back, sire," I said. It was a joyful and very powerful feeling that came over me. Cyrus and Maverick did the same. "Stand up, snap out of it," Emmett said tiredly. I stood and smiled to him. He placed his hand in the air, and I placed mine to his. "Told you I would make it. Gentlemen, shall we travel now to Valhalla?" I laughed and smiled, gave him a hug, letting go of our fist. We stood back, then letting Emmett lead the way with the scepter. He went down the back passageway that would lead to the garden maze of Valhalla. As we entered into the opening of the courtyard of Valhalla from the maze, Partina, Juanita, Elizabeth, and Stockard came running to Emmett. Juanita was the first to reach him. She threw her arms around his neck, smothering him with kisses. Partina then grabbed a hold of him. Then Elizabeth followed, grabbing him also. We stood to the side of him, out of the way. I started to laugh. It was a sight to see them all attack him. He did very well, keeping his balance and holding on to the scepter. He looked over above them to Stockard. She had stopped in her tracks and was keeping back from him. You could tell she wanted to grab him as well. With laughter in his voice, he called to her, "Well, Stockard, why are you not jumping all over me?" "No room," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Would the three of you let me breathe a little?" he said as he continued to laugh. They all stepped back and looked to him, as it was obvious they wanted to take a hold of him again. However, he was saved as his father and mothers came out of the palace. Lewis walked over to Emmett. We all went to one knee with our heads bowed. He reached for Emmett's shoulder, raising him to his feet and placing him into an embrace. You could see tears in his eyes as well. It is good to see you, my son. You look so much older. I am very proud of you, he said. I have not been gone that long, father, to have aged. In fact, I look a wreck. He laughed. We all then watched as he handed the scepter he had to Lewis. As the high priest took it, the gem on the top glowed a red color, which indicated a change was needed within the kingdom. Lewis then turned to the rest of those there. Rise, he called out, and all stood around them. The joining of your second priestess will take place in 2 passings of a day. Lewis said, Yes, father. Then the following passing of the day, the taking of my 3rd priestess. Emmett informed his father. As you wish, my son. There is now 20 years passing before the coronation. As for now, I believe you should rest. Lewis told him. I watched as Emmett nodded his head to Lewis and waved the excited women before him. He then turned to us. Law, I will see you in the morn. I will meet you at the lodge, he called to me. I would rather meet you here, if it is all right with you, I spoke up. I had this feeling that Emmett did not need to be bouncing about the kingdom on his own. Call it intuition or what you might. All right, Lawrence, as you wish, he said with a smirk smile. That night, I rested a lot easier than I had within the past couple months. The next morning, we went to Valhalla. Emmett was in the courtyard of the garden. I walked up on him and down to one knee to his side. All right, let us get this out of the way. 2 words. Cease that. He laughed, and I raised to stand. You are the Millennium High Priest, I told him. Yes, and you will not even do it when I become High Priest. Coffee, he informed me. Sure, I laughed. I sat down across the small table with him as my coffee was offered to me. So what happened? I asked him. You have been gone for 2 months. He looked to me, taking a drink from his cup, setting it down. I cannot tell you, he said. I shrugged. All right, you're forbidden to speak of it. No, I do not know what happened. I walked up the base of the mountain and entered the garden of fruit. Then I crossed over to the crystal lake, and that was it. And speaking of walking up the base, why did you try and follow me, dumbass? He laughed, and so did I. I did not even realize I was until I was ceased moving. It was as if a transparent field was preventing me from traveling any farther, and I was stuck again. I thought for sure I was going to be there for a while. I told him. He chuckled. That was about as odd as the next thing I remember was moving back into the garden from Crystal Lake, or to the Garden of Fruit, and the scepter in hand, and feeling like I could just lay and sleep for 40 days, he said. I could tell he was telling the truth. Emmett really never told much that was not the truth. Well, not to me. That is, and only stretched what could be the truth when he did tell something untruth. The passing of the next week, Emmett married Elizabeth, and then turned around the next day and married Juanita. I really felt regretful for the man. I did not even want one free woman. He already had 3, and would within the next 6 passings of the years would have 4 more. He had 7 full year cycles to take the kingdom's daughters as his priestess, or what kingdoms had daughters. I was sitting in my office looking to a picture of Emmett myself when we were younger, back in Levels. I felt a dark energy about the room. It was targeted on Emmett. Someone, did not want him on the throne. I could not understand the feeling. However, it was very strong and powerful, and my concern for my close friend rised. I had Maverick and Cyrus take post with Emmett. They would have a room in Valhalla. Emmett would not be out of their sight. It had been the passing of, I would say, 6 months since Emmett returned from the Lord's Mountain. We were sitting in his office at Valhalla. Partina and the others had taken the kids down to the Kingdom Park. We were speaking of the circle members of the kingdom. At the time, Partina and Emmett had 5 children. They were Carradine, Barbarana, Sheen, Elliot, and Matthew. Juanita, Partina, Stockard, and Elizabeth came into the office. All 3 had tears in their eyes. The one in the office was Emmett, Scott, Mike, Danny, Maverick, Cyrus, and myself. As we saw them enter, Emmett and Scott and the rest of us stood. Emmett and Scott moved over to them. Elizabeth grabbed a hold of Scott and started to cry, and Partina and Juanita stood looking to Emmett. "What is going on? What is amiss?" Emmett asked. "Emmett, it's Matthew. Has been taken by someone," Partina said, crying. "The children are playing seek and find. Matthew was hiding between 2 trees. I had thought I knew where they all were. Emmett, I could sense him, until Carrie could not find him where he should have been. Emmett, we have to follow them. I fear they are going to take him out of the kingdom," Juanita explained. "Elizabeth, you and Stockard take the children home," Emmett said, then looked back to me. I stood, and so did the rest of us. "I will inform the rest of the circle and Father," Scott said, kissing Elizabeth and letting her go. Elizabeth and Scott had kind of a fling love affair going on that Emmett permitted, as Elizabeth was actually in love with Scott. However, she was promised to the high priest, and as Scott refused to be high priest, we all really thought nothing of it. We left the palace with Juanita, as she was the one that was around when they took him, or when they took Matthew. We followed the trail. Even with Emmett's help, we were lost. We followed the trail to the start of the wasteland. Entering into the wasteland, Emmett turned to me and Juanita. "Nothing. They did not come this way. It is as if they just vanished," Emmett said. "I know," Juanita said, crying. We had no choice besides to give up the search. All kingdoms, villages, and towns and areas were on alert. It would amount to nothing, as we all felt that Matthew was taken not only from the kingdom, however also from the Sultan and the surrounding areas. Whoever had him had removed him from the planet itself. Chapter 17. After Matthew was abducted, I was sitting with Emmett, Juanita, and Partina in the sitting room at my lodge when Angela and Carolina came into the room. Cyrus and Maverick was there also. They were playing a card game sitting at the small table. "Stewart, I have a request," she called to me. I looked up from one to the other. "Wonderful," I said in a whisper. "What is it?" I asked. "Can Carol come and stay with me at Father's for a while?" she asked. "I will not change colors. You may cease staring at me," I heard Partina say. "Why are you anyway?" I then heard her ask as she stood moving over to the drink station. "Just seeing mistress as mistress is. Seems the noble peasant girl gets to be high priestess, or gets the high priest was not enough. Mistress conned mistress's way into being a high priestess." Carol had the nerve to speak up and say. We all turned and looked to her, and Partina slapped her across the face. Then I really could not say what came over Carol. She actually slapped Partina, and when she did, Juanita stood and Carol suddenly was slammed up against the far wall. "You little slut! You do not raise a hand to those that are free, especially to your Millennium High Priestess." Emmett stood and took a hold of Juanita, and Carol fell to the floor. She was smart enough to not raise to her feet. "Report to Adam and beg discipline. Then go to your holding," I say calmly to her and look to Angela. "As I am not going to be at the lodge all that much, yes, you can take her with you after she receives her discipline." "Partina, I am regretful," Angela spoke up. "Do not waste your time. Angela, we both know she cannot stand me, nor I her." Angela nodded her head and embarrassed left the room. "Where are you going that you are not going to be here?" Emmett asked me. "Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention it to you. I am going to stay at the Palace of Devar." I smirked and looked at him. "Law, you really think I cannot take care of myself?" He smirked back. I know you can. However, I would feel better if we are there with you," I told him. "I have all my brothers and my sisters." He started to say when he looked to me. "All right, Law. Cyrus and Maverick also, I take it," he said, and the two of them answered yes at the same time, and immediately. "What about the lodge?" Emmett asked. "Adam and Sophia will take care of it. If they need me, they know where I am," I told him. "I will have you an office, and you can work from there if you want. They can just send all the information to Devar for the lodge," Emmett said. "That sounds even better." Emmett, Partina said with her hand on her stomach. We all turned to her. She had been with child, and it was time for the children to be transferred. We all rushed to Valhalla to the development garden. Maverick, Cyrus, and I stood outside the room she was in. Emmett had come out to us. She had two girls. They are moving them into the development chamber. he said, and we followed him to where he was going. Lewis had met up with us, and we all moved to the chamber. As we entered, the women were going on about a white glare that was seen around the girls. It was about the same glare that was around Barbara, Carradine, and Matthew. Also, we had thought it to be the way the light was in the chambers. I saw Steward was now with them also. "What is with the white glare?" Steward had asked. "It is the way the lights are shining on the chamber," Partina replied. Barbara had the same glare. However, Barbara had the same glare. However, it is more of a smoky glare, she had said. As we came up on them, she sounded a little worried. We walked over to the infant chamber in the chambers. "It is amazing." Lewis said it seemed amazed, or amused. "What is amazing?" "They are children, Father. I know you have seen two transferred at the same time," Emmett remarked, with a laugh in his voice. "No, Emmett, see the glow on your daughters, my son," he said, waving a hand to the chambers. "I will have the lights checked in here." Barbara and the others had the same problem, Partina informed them. "There is nothing wrong with the lighting, Partina," Lewis said with a chuckle in his voice and a bright smile on his face as he looked to the rest of us. "That is the glow of Estastar and Trasteria, the most powerful daughter and protector of Odin's," Lewis told us. I looked closer to the small fetus. Trasteria. "Father, is that not a myth and a legend? 7 females that protect the throne? I find that really hard to believe, as it is said they broke the decrees at every chance," Emmett was saying as he looked to his father. "The protectors of the throne, and the daughters of Odin, and the Magnificent Seven. No, my son, it is not a myth, nor is the divine," Lewis informed us. "I do not understand. What have they to do with my girls?" Partina asked, moving closer to them. "There was and is 21 daughters of Odin. Each contained abilities of the Garden of Odin and the protectors of the garden, which is the world of Estastar in which we live. They ran in packs of 7. The first 7 was the Magnificent Seven, the protectors of the throne. The second pack was the Mystic Seven, the protectors of the circle." He chuckled. "And the third pack was known as the Misfit Seven, actually the Jewel Seven. However, they caused trouble for their sisters, which caused their sisters to clean up after them. So the legend tells. It is said 7 millenniums prior to this one, Prometheus got to the daughters and persuaded them to do his bidding, and so Odin banished them to never again return. However, there was a prophecy written telling of their return. My son, That glow represents the return of the pack. One of those two girls will have the ability to connect with Tristar, or will be Tristar, and will lead you into peace. Your rule over the throne will be much easier than mine. You will have the help to defend the throne from Armethius and Heldendris, the help I and others could only dream of, he said, placing his hand on his shoulder. You will have the rest. So I can tell you, I know for certain, my son, that you will have 21 girls before your high priest. He then chuckled and patted his back. Emmett looked up to Lewis. Father, I know what you are speaking of, and it was not Odin's daughters, yet the daughters of the high priest they connected with. What if Armethius again persuades them? Then what? Emmett said with concern in his voice. Emmett, from the history of the daughters of Odin, I believe they had returned 4 times, and each time somewhere or some were able to turn from Odin again. However, not the magnificent ones. The history and what I have learnt is that the high priest that had the connecting daughters that turned on him, he never truly believed in them, and he denied what and who they were. So that made it easier for the R and his followers to persuade them. You will know what to do, my son. Read the prophecies of the Magnificent Seven and learn about them and help them. There is still that chance of them turning on the garden, Emmett said. Lewis nodded his head. There is that chance. However, if they do, they will not be as strong as if they did not. You are so worried about the bad seeds, he asked Emmett. No, Father, just the fact it could happen, and I know how strong in abilities those women were, or it says they were. However, in the name the Lord, they have that strength you speak of. In the name of the R, they do not. Maverick, Cyrus, and I had moved into the palace of Devar. I was running the lodge from Devar. The kingdom Thornton's forfeiture was transferred to my lodge, to Emmett's cousin's Jarek's lodge, who was known to be the best in Atlantis and was only 4 years out of classes. We were all setting out in the garden when Barbara came running over to us and jumped up on Emmett's lap. Guess what? She said. What? He asked. Want to see what I can do? She asked him. All right, show me. What can you do? He replied to her. Well, if I do, it is going to cost you, she said, acting all grown up in the 8th level of classes. What will it cost me? Emmett asked with a chuckle. 1 hug and 2 kisses, and I shall not settle for less, she informed him. He started laughing, as the rest of us did, and he gave her a hug and a kiss on each cheek, and she clapped her hands, and the table levitated, and she jumped down off of Emmett's lap and pointed at the table. See? I can do that. The drinks on the table spilt. I stood up with a wet lap. Partina did as well. Elizabeth was sitting on Scott's lap, and they both got wet. Emmett placed his hands over the table to steady it before the other drinks spilt. That is good, Barb. Now, "Can you set it down?" Juanita asked with hope in her voice. "Sure can," she said, and clapped her hands, and again, and with a thump, the table was down. If it was not for Emmett, and the rest of the drinks would have been goners. The Dinahs hurried over, cleaning up the mess, and Barbara ran off so proud of herself. Emmett looked to me and the others, and I to him, and we just started laughing, thanking the Lord for the terrors of Atlantis. Barbara was one of 9 that would hold that title.